Hey guys, TheAirsoftTech here, and welcome back to 5-Minute Tech Tips. On this episode of 5-Minute Tech Tips, I'm going to be showing you guys how to lock down bushings in your gearbox shell. So the primary reason we lock bushings in gearbox shells, as opposed to letting them sit there loosely, is that the bushing is made out of steel, and the gearbox shells are typically made out of aluminum or zinc aluminum combinations, and very rarely are they made out of something stronger than the bushing itself. And so if you let the bushings sit in the gearbox shell freely, sometimes the bushings will actually rotate with the gears and wear on the gearbox shell. And this will effectively make your gearbox shell useless, as it'll expand the bushings where they sit in the gearbox shell. So the whole point of this is to kind of increase the longevity of your bushings, your gearbox shell. It kind of removes another variable that doesn't need to be there in the gearbox shell while it functions. So let's head over to the desk and I'll show you how it's done. Alright, so here we are ready to go. A couple things you need to do before you actually start doing this, locking the bushings into the gearbox shell. You need to completely wash and disassemble your gearbox shell, like take everything out of it, absolutely everything, and then wash your gearbox shell with hot water and soap, and then dry it off like at a low temperature in your oven or something like that. And then make sure you do the same for your bushings. The reason you have to do this is because you cannot bond, use any bonding agent like glue or JB Weld or epoxy with greasy bushings and greasy gearbox shell. It just won't bond and it won't stick. So go ahead and do that and then we'll get started. Another thing I'll mention real quick before we get started with the actual process. Some people find that scoring the surface of where the bushing sits in here with a file is something that helps the bushing and JB Weld to bond to the gearbox shell. I've never actually done that. I've never felt the need to. I've never had a situation where I've JB welded or epoxied bushings down and then them come undone. I've usually had to beat them out or like slowly heat them up and then beat them out with a hammer and a punch. So some people do it, some people don't. If you want to do it, go for it. If you don't want to do it, don't worry about it because I've never done it before. Alright, so the tools you're going to need to actually do all this is you're going to need a flathead screwdriver to kind of mess around with your JB Weld. JB Weld or epoxy, JB Weld and epoxy kind of similar, but I personally use JB Weld. It works really well on metal. Some people use glue, some people use Loctite. Again, Loctite and glue aren't necessarily the best thing to bond metal to metal. I find JB Weld to be significantly better. And then you want a kind of dish to stir your JB Weld into, and a paper towel to clean up any residue that you have around the gearbox shell. You don't want to put just excess amounts of JB Weld because that might interfere with tolerances inside the receiver, so I just am very careful with how much JB Weld that I put on. And I'll show you exactly what I mean by that when we do it. Alright, one real quick thing I'll show you before we get started with making our JB Weld. Make sure that your bushings fit appropriately into your gearbox shell. So this is a Crytac gearbox shell with 8mm Lonex bushings that I'm changing them out to. And you can see these bushings fit appropriately. You've probably noticed if you've teched before that sometimes bushings are too small, too large, sometimes bearings are too large or too small, just slightly. And if they're too small, you can definitely throw some JB Weld in there and it'll be okay. But the reason why I do this is that you can see these kind of just lift off the surface a little bit. And if I were to drop a gear in there and a spring and a motor, and I were to pull a trigger, this would rotate really quickly and sharply and kind of catch and dig up against the gearbox shell, because this steel is way harder than this gearbox shell, so it is going to wear it out. And over time you can actually expand this hole and cause your tolerances to be so far off that the gearbox shell is useless. So I almost always will JB Weld bushings down. The only time I won't is when the bushings have to like stamp in with a punch and a hammer. Then I don't do it because they're in there so well already. But yeah, just make sure you check on that and make sure all your bushings or bearings fit appropriately into your gearbox shell. Alright, so let's make our JB Weld epoxy here. So you have these two agents here, and you do like a 1-to-1 combination, and that's all you got to do. And so just kind of place into this dish here. Tech tip inside the 5-minute tech tip video: don't let your JB Weld get to this point where it's just like kill me please. Take better care of your stuff than I do. And yeah, there you have it. You have your epoxy, or sorry, your JB Weld there, 1-to-1 or so approximately, and then you just take your flathead here and you mix it up. And that's all you do. And then once you have this mixed up to where it's like a nasty looking gray putty, then it's ready to use. All right, so now we're ready to use epoxy to get this bushing in place. So you just take your bushing and, you know, do one last final test. It looks good. So let's set that one aside. That one's going to go right here. And then we're just going to take some of this epoxy here. And you really don't need a whole lot. You're just going to apply it like that. If you need to get a little more, do so. And then take off what like gross excess you have, like I do here. And then we'll just drop our bushing in place here. Try to be careful not to get any of the JB Weld inside the axle slot, because you can get it out easily, but still it's a pet peeve of mine. And then I'll take my paper towel here and then I'll just kind of smash it in place. And I can get rid of all that junk there. And then just like that. And then I like to take this here and I like to clean this up too. And then obviously look inside your axle slot there and make sure you don't have any in there. And you can kind of get that out if you roll up your paper towel like this. And there you go. That's exactly how you do that. And just do that with every other bushing in the gearbox shell, or every bushing in the gearbox shell, and let it dry and set for about 12 to 24 hours, and then start shimming your gearbox, and then you'll get going perfectly fine with that. So here we have the finished product. These bushings are nicely JB welded in, and about after 16 or so hours they should be pretty set in there and pretty hard to remove unless I take a punch and a hammer to it. I know some people that will mound a bunch of JB Weld up here on the outside too, to kind of help secure the bushing more. I personally don't see a point to that. I've never had a problem with the way I do it, so I've never had to add more JB Weld. With bearings, you might want to be just significantly more careful. If you get JB Weld inside the bearing, you have a pretty high risk of locking up that bearing and essentially making it useless. And that's a pretty expensive mistake that you don't make more than once or twice. In terms of cleanup, just wipe out your dish here with paper towels and obviously your screwdriver and throw those things away. And yeah, you're pretty much good to do it the next time you need to do it. So as you guys just saw, this is a pretty simple task that anybody can perform. It helps increase the longevity of your gearbox shell, your bushings, your bearings. It's going to help out with your shimming, and it's going to make your shimming just sound that much better at the end of the day. So yeah, thank you guys for watching this episode of 5-Minute Tech Tips. As usual, like, comment, subscribe, tell your friends about me, and share this video around so you help this channel grow. Something like 70% of the people that watch my videos aren't actually subscribed to this channel, which is kind of baffling to me. That's quite a lot of people. But again, as per usual, tell me in the comments what you think that I'm doing well and what you think that I could do better. And obviously, if you have any critiques of what I showed in this video, please drop that down below and we can chat about it. So yeah, I'll see you guys in the next video. But until then, stay tuned, techs.